Chapter 1. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Miss. The woman Mr. Fu has been supporting just gave birth to his child. The butler's words hit me like a hammer, reverberating in my chest. In that moment, my world seemed to collapse. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as if cold air had frozen my blood. Yet, I maintained a calm expression, hiding the turmoil inside. Mr. Fu had been secretly supporting another woman and let her have his child. Had I really been living in a lie all these years? I didn't react immediately, I just stared at the butler. His face still calm but his eyes betraying a hint of worry. He knew what this meant for me. And though my heart was storming, my exterior remained composed. I understand. I finally spoke. My voice even quieter than I expected. The butler seemed to let out a sigh of relief and softly asked, Miss, what will you do now? I took a deep breath and turned to look out the window. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, and the air in the room felt completely different from the chaotic hustle of the city outside. The emotions bubbling inside me were too complicated to put into words. As I gazed at the busy city, I felt like I was looking at a scene from another world. In that moment, Mr. Fu's face appeared in my mind. His deep, cold features. We had been engaged for 3 years, without a single crack in our relationship. And yet, here he was, betraying me, betraying everything we had built. I had once thought he was the man I could rely on for the rest of my life. But now, I saw the truth. Everything between us was just my naive fantasy. I didn't want to waste any more time wondering why he betrayed me, or enduring the lies. I was no longer the woman waiting for him to give me a future. Taking a deep breath, I decided to end it all. I walked straight to my desk, picked up my phone, and dialed Mr. Fu's number. The beep of the call connecting only made my calmness grow stronger. I waited a moment before his voice came on the line, tinged with impatience and confusion. What's going on? Do you need something? I responded coldly. Mr. Fu, we're calling off the engagement. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds before his voice turned frantic. What do you mean? Is there some misunderstanding? We're already prepared for the wedding. Haven't I been good enough to you? Why are you doing this? I let out a quiet laugh, though it was filled with ice. Misunderstanding? I repeated his words with disdain. Mr. Fu, do you still think I'll keep playing the role of the ignorant fiancé in your world? I know everything. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Mr. Fu's voice was rising now, clearly realizing something was off. You've been secretly supporting that woman, and she's had your child. I didn't hesitate, laying it all out. And you think I'll still marry you? You overestimate yourself. How could you do this to me? His tone had shifted to anger, but there was more reluctance than fury. I admit what I did was wrong, but you can't just throw everything away. I love you. I really love you. Hearing him say that made me scoff inwardly. Love? I repeated softly. You've probably said that to her too, right? You don't love her. You just treated her like a mistress while I'm your real love. Isn't that right? My tone turned icy. Mr. Fu, love isn't something you can just say to keep someone around. It requires trust, loyalty, and you have neither. There was silence on his end for a long time. I could almost picture his face. Stunned, unable to believe I had cut him off so decisively. Eventually, his voice came through again, laced with desperation. Are you really going to end it all? Don't you care about our past together? Past? I chuckled, my voice steady but resolute. I'm sorry, Mr. Fu, but I can't waste another second of my time on you. I've made my decision. Our engagement is over. without giving him any more chances to explain. I hung up the phone. Standing by the window, I closed my eyes and felt the cool breeze blowing in from the open window. I thought I would feel sad about ending this relationship, but all I felt was a deep sense of relief. For the first time, I wasn't bound to anyone, I was free. The true freedom. At last. But the fire of revenge had already ignited in my heart. Mr. Foo's betrayal hurt, but what it did more was awaken the coldness and resolve deep within me. I was no longer the girl who had depended on him, the one who gave everything for him. I would take back everything that was mine, and this battle would be one I fought on my terms. Here's the translation of Chapter 2 with continued localization and adaptation. Chapter 2. The next day, Mr. Fu flooded my phone with calls. I knew he must be panicking. A powerful man like him, who had carefully planned our wedding, couldn't accept that it had all fallen apart so suddenly. But I didn't pick up his calls. Instead, I stayed at home quietly, pondering my next move. The butler came to me and said, Mr. Fu has sent over a file. He's hoping to meet with you and talk about things. I looked at the teacup in my hand, my expression unfazed. He's eager to meet with me to resolve this. The butler added, almost hesitating. I could see right through him. He was just trying to find an excuse for Mr. Fu, hoping that sweet words could convince me to soften. I opened the file and saw that Mr. Fu was offering compensation to make things right, luxury homes, expensive cars, international trips, all the things he thought could change my mind. I couldn't help but laugh coldly. If it weren't for my desire for revenge, I might have been swayed by such material temptations. But now, all of these things seemed meaningless to me. I closed the file, picked up my phone, and sent him a message * no meeting. The engagement is cancelled. And it's over for good. *. After sending the text, I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes. A strange calm washed over me. I didn't feel the need for immediate, hasty action. I knew that the best revenge wasn't impulsive, it was to let him slowly fall into the abyss. To make him realize, once he had lost everything, just how final my decision was. But the process of revenge wasn't entirely without complications. Though I had decided to sever all ties with Mr. Fu, it didn't mean I could immediately disappear from his world. He was still a man of power, with influence and resources, while I was just the girl who had been pampered by him. The gap between us wasn't just emotional, but also one of power, status, and resources. I began to plan how to weaken Mr. Fu's position, starting with his company. I called my lawyer. Get a clear picture of Mr. Fu's company's equity structure. I want to take control of his business. After receiving confirmation from the lawyer, I began preparing a series of legal documents, planning to acquire shares step by step and gradually take control of his company. Mr. Fu's company was more than just his career, it was his pride. And I would be the one to crush it beneath my feet. In the days that followed, I ignored Mr. Fu's constant attempts to reach me and focused on my plan. Meanwhile, he didn't stop trying to reconcile. Through mutual friends, he sent word that he was willing to change and even showed up at my door, standing outside, waiting for me to give him another chance. I didn't open the door. I simply watched him leave in disappointment. In the silhouette of his retreating figure, I saw the man who once stood confident and unshakable, now walking toward failure. A few days later, Mr. Fu called me again. His voice was filled with obvious exhaustion and helplessness. I know you've decided to give up on me, but can you give me a chance to prove my love to you again? This time, I didn't scoff, nor did I hang up immediately. I paused, and then spoke quietly. Mr. Fu, I've been thinking about the good times we shared. But everything is in the past now. You've disappointed me too many times. And I no longer believe in you. There was no response on the other end. Just a deep sigh. I could almost imagine his face, filled with guilt and helplessness. But for me, it no longer mattered. Mr. Fu would never understand how I felt, or how resolute I was in my decision. After hanging up, I stood up and walked to the window, watching the sky grow dimmer. Every step I took, every action I made, was part of my revenge. Mr. Fu thought he still controlled everything, but I had already seen through his intentions and quietly laid trap after trap behind his back. But I wasn't in a hurry to let him know. I would let him sink deeper into his pride, forcing him to realize the cost of his choices. This was just the beginning. Here is Chapter 3, continuing with the adaptation to American culture while maintaining the emotional intensity and narrative flow. Chapter 3. Days later, Mr. Fu's company hit a snag. Stocks dropped. Employees whispered. And I, the one pulling the strings behind the scenes, remained calm. I had no intention of rushing my next move. I preferred to watch, to observe the perfect moment when everything would fall into place. I gathered my team in a private conference room. The whiteboard was filled with names, key shareholders and stakeholders who had been supporting Mr. Fu's company. My plan was simple: take control of their votes. We need to ensure these key shareholders' votes swing in our favor, I said, my voice steady and unwavering as I pointed to the list. We'll offer them incentives they can't refuse. Do you want to play this safe? My lead strategist asked. Or do you want to take full control? Go all in? I met his gaze with a calm smile. All in. I'm not interested in being anyone's second choice. This company, this empire, it's mine now. Every inch of it. We spent the next few days quietly building our influence, forging close ties with the right people, and ensuring that when the time came, we would have the majority. Meanwhile, Mr. Fu continued to send word through mutual friends that he was willing to change, that he had realized his mistakes. But I saw through his act. He wasn't apologizing because he truly understood the hurt he caused. He was desperate to salvage the life he had built with me. I let him stew in his own regret. Then, the shareholder meeting arrived. Mr. Fu's desperate attempt to regain control of his company was about to collapse. As he stood at the podium, trying to smooth things over with his employees and shareholders, the votes were counted. The moment of truth arrived, and the results were clear. The boardroom fell silent as Mr. Fu's supporters turned on him. His face went pale as the votes flipped. All in my favor. The shareholders who once stood by him now saw their chances at lucrative deals dwindling. They saw me as the future. As they cast their votes, they weren't just investing in a company, they were investing in the woman who would reshape everything. When Mr. Fu received the news, he was in disbelief. I knew it wouldn't hit him all at once. But when the stock prices plummeted and the board voted to remove him from his position, his world collapsed. I didn't rush to see him. I didn't want the satisfaction of watching him crumble face to face. I simply kept to my plan, silently orchestrating every piece of his downfall from the shadows. Days passed. The company's financials were leaking. His board members were defecting. And even the media was beginning to ask questions. He was scrambling, trying to find a way out. But it was already too late. And then, just as I expected, he came to me. Through a mutual friend. He arranged a private meeting. He came to my apartment, standing at the door with a folder in his hands, labeled cooperation. I didn't even look surprised. I didn't feel pity. I just stood there, waiting for him to hand me the file. The desperation was clear in his eyes. I know you probably think it's all over, he said, his voice hoarse. But we can still work together. I can help you rebuild everything. I'll give you whatever you want. Please. Let's fix this. I looked at him coldly, flipping open the file he handed me. I skimmed it, then closed it. What do you think I need from you? I asked, my voice low but firm. His expression faltered. What do you mean? I didn't bother to explain. What you can offer me has already lost its value. The company you built, the life you built, those things are already in my hands. You're just a man trying to cling to power that's slipping away. He looked crushed. You really think this is over? That I'm done? I didn't flinch. You were never truly in control. You played a game. And now you're losing. Everything you thought was yours is already mine. This was never about winning a fight, it was about taking everything you took for granted. He stood in silence for a moment, as if trying to grasp what had happened to him. His pride, his empire, his relationships, everything had crumbled. And I had made sure of it. I don't expect your forgiveness, he said quietly. I'm not asking for it anymore. I just want you to know that I truly did love you. I smiled, but it wasn't out of affection. It was a smile born of triumph. You don't get to define love after everything you've done. What you love is control. What you love is power. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned my back on him and walked toward the window. The city outside was a blur of lights. But my focus was clear. Mr. Fu was no longer a part of my life. And he would never be again. He didn't leave immediately. I knew he had hoped for more. For a chance to rebuild some piece of the life we once had. But that life was gone. And it would never return. I heard his footsteps fade as he left. But I didn't feel any relief. There was no satisfaction in this moment, just a sense of finality. Everything he had once been was now in my hands. And now, it was my time to rebuild, this time. On my terms. Here's Chapter 4 with continued localization. Ensuring emotional depth and clarity. Chapter 4. The following week. The media frenzy around Mr. Fu and his company intensified. Stock prices continued to freefall. And stories of financial mismanagement and corporate negligence spread across every news outlet. It was only a matter of time before the company was officially taken over. I had strategically placed my influence, working through legal and financial channels to secure a tight grip on the business. Yet, as I watched the chaos unfold, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a quiet, unsettling calm. In the past, I would have felt vindicated. The betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak, it all would have fueled a rush of emotions. But now, all that was left was a cold emptiness. As if all the battles had been fought and won, but there was no real reward to claim. I sat in my office, flipping through documents related to the company's restructuring. My phone buzzed. A message from Zara. Asterisk, I can't believe what's happening to him. Did you really have to ruin him like this? Asterisk. Zara, always the one to question my methods, was both a supporter and a voice of reason in my life. I knew she was genuinely concerned about the toll this was taking on me. But what she didn't understand was that this wasn't just about him. It was about me taking back control. It was about showing the world, asterisk, and myself, asterisk, that I could rise from the ashes. Even if it meant walking over those who had tried to keep me down. Asterisk, it's not about him. Asterisk, I texted back. Asterisk, it's about taking back what's mine. You don't understand what it was like to be trapped in his world. To be just a shadow of the woman I could be. Asterisk. I didn't expect a response. But minutes later, Zara replied with a simple, asterisk, I get it. Just don't lose yourself in this. Asterisk. I knew what she meant. Revenge could easily consume a person if they weren't careful. But I had no intention of letting it define me. I had already made my move. The game was won. The only thing left was to close the chapter and move forward. I had always been strong, but now I felt like a different person. More resolved. More independent. And as I glanced at the company's financial report on my desk, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. This was just the beginning. The real work was in rebuilding, in taking this company and using it to carve out a future where I called the shots. Just as I was about to dive back into the details, a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see my assistant standing there with a folder in her hands. "Miss Green, there's someone here to see you. They're requesting an immediate meeting." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Mr. Fu," she said, almost hesitant to say the name. I let out a long, slow breath. So, he had come to beg again. After all this time, after everything that had happened, he still thought he could talk his way back into my life. "Let him in," I said, setting the folder aside. A few moments later, Mr. Fu walked into my office, his expression a mix of defeat and determination. He looked older than I remembered, the weight of his failures visible in the lines on his face. "I didn't think you would actually show up," I said coldly, not bothering to stand. "What is it now, Mr. Fu? Another round of empty promises?" He didn't respond immediately, instead taking a seat across from me. His posture was stiff, as if he were trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. "I need you to listen," he said quietly. "I know I've lost everything, my company, my reputation, but I'm asking you to reconsider." "Reconsider?" I repeated, my voice hard. "After everything you did to me, you think I owe you anything? You think I should care about your shattered dreams? I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I love you, Emma. I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, let me fix this. Let me make it right." I laughed bitterly. "You love me?" I said, leaning forward. "You have no idea what love means. You're nothing but a man who used me to build your empire. And now that everything's crumbling, you want to come back to the one person you think will save you." His eyes darkened. "You don't understand. I've been through hell trying to make sense of this. But I swear, I'll do anything at all, to earn your forgiveness." I shook my head. "I don't need your redemption. I'm not the woman who waits for someone to fix her anymore. I'm not the girl who was dependent on you. I've already moved on. And you need to do the same." He was silent for a long time, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see the regret in his eyes, the desperation, but I felt nothing. Not anymore. "Goodbye, Mr. Fu," I said, standing up to show him the door. "This is where your story with me ends." He stood, defeated, and walked out without another word. As the door closed behind him, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of finality. It was done. No more games. No more manipulation. No more looking back. Now, the real work began. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine, I was going to rebuild it. Bigger and better than before. With no one to stop me. Here is Chapter 5. Continuing with the emotional journey and the path toward full independence. Chapter 5. The days that followed Mr. Fu's last visit were oddly quiet. The city continued to buzz outside my window. But inside, I felt a strange sense of peace. My plan was in motion, and there was no going back. I was no longer just a woman scorned seeking revenge, I was someone who had fully embraced her independence. I spent my time finalizing the restructuring of the company, making sure everything was in place. I knew the road ahead would require precision. But now, everything felt like it was mine for the taking. Every move I made was calculated, every piece of this empire would eventually be under my control. Zara stopped by one afternoon, her usual bright energy cutting through the stillness of my office. She looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "You've been busy." I smiled faintly, setting down a report, just making sure everything falls into place. Zara leaned against the doorframe, her gaze shifting to the papers scattered across my desk. "So, what now? You've already crushed Mr. Foo's company. Got what you wanted from him. What's next?" I didn't answer right away. I knew she was right to ask. The company was just a stepping stone, part of the bigger plan. The power I was consolidating would give me the ability to shape the future I wanted. Not just for myself, but for those around me as well. I need to start thinking beyond this, I said finally. I have what I want from the past. But the future, that's where the real challenge lies. Zara's expression softened, and she crossed the room to sit across from me. "You've already got the whole world at your feet. What more do you need?" I looked out the window, my eyes scanning the horizon. I need to build something real. Something that stands for who I am, not just what I've been through. The silence between us stretched, but there was no discomfort in it. Zara knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't just talking about business. It was about reclaiming everything that had once been taken from me. It was about showing the world, and more importantly, myself, that I could create my own path, one that didn't rely on anyone else. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from my lawyer, confirming that Mr. Foo's company had officially been dissolved. The board had voted unanimously to sell off the remaining assets, and the funds had already been transferred into my account. A small smile tugged at my lips. It was done. Not just the financial takeover, but the emotional finality of it all. "Everything's in motion," I told Zara, putting my phone down. "The company is officially mine. But this is just the beginning." She raised her glass in a quiet toast. "To your new empire. To the future," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. "And to everything that comes after." The following weeks were a blur of meetings, acquisitions, and contract signings. I was no longer just the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had turned that betrayal into something far greater, something powerful. And I was determined to keep building. One day, I received an unexpected visitor. A man, sharply dressed, entered my office without any formal introduction. I looked up, surprised, as he stood in front of me, holding a briefcase. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to place him. He didn't immediately speak, instead setting the briefcase down on my desk. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I'm here to offer a partnership." I raised an eyebrow. "A partnership? With me?" "Yes," he said. "You've made quite the impression, Miss Green. I represent a group of investors who would like to explore a joint venture with you. Something big. Something that could change the entire market." I wasn't quick to jump into anything new, especially after everything that had happened with Mr. Foo. But there was something about this man's confident demeanor that intrigued me. He wasn't intimidated by the power I had just gained, he was offering to help amplify it. I leaned back in my chair. "Go on," I said, intrigued. He opened the briefcase and slid a folder across the desk. "This is an opportunity to take your brand global. We have the capital, the resources, and the network. All you need to do is sign on." I glanced over the proposal, my mind working quickly. This wasn't just about business, it was about positioning myself as a leader, a powerful force in my industry. And this offer? It was the gateway. "I'll think about it," I said, folding the document back up and placing it in the briefcase. "But let's make one thing clear, I won't be anyone's pawn. He smiled, nodding. We wouldn't have it any other way. As he left my office, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. I had always known I was capable of more than what the world had originally expected of me. This was my chance to show just how far I could go. Over the next few months, I expanded my influence, both in the business world and beyond. The company flourished, and soon enough, I was being recognized as one of the most powerful women in the industry. It wasn't just about what I had built, it was about the legacy I was creating. But even with all the success, I still couldn't fully shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered. Was this truly enough? Had I really found what I was looking for? Or was I just filling a void that couldn't be filled? One night, as I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city below, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Zara *. How are you really doing? Asterisk. I thought for a moment, then replied asterisk. I'm exactly where I need to be. Asterisk. The truth? I was still figuring that out. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to stop until I had everything I wanted. Here is Chapter 6. Continuing the journey and further shaping the narrative. Chapter 6. The weeks following the partnership deal were a whirlwind. My new venture, a global expansion into fashion and luxury goods, was taking off at an incredible speed. It felt as though everything I had been working toward was finally materializing before my eyes. But as my empire grew, so did the weight of responsibility. It was a different kind of challenge than I had expected. No longer was I fighting for survival, now. I was fighting to maintain control and ensure everything I touched turned to gold. But the more success I achieved, the more I found myself reflecting on the past. The fire of revenge that had burned so brightly when I first ended things with Mr. Fu had cooled, but it left something in its wake, a sort of emptiness. A question that lingered asterisk. Had this been enough? Asterisk. I was no longer the woman who needed anyone. I was the woman others came to for solutions. I had built my own path, and I had done it without anyone's help. But that sense of triumph that should have been fulfilling was starting to feel hollow. I couldn't deny it any longer. The emptiness I felt wasn't about the past, it was about the future. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I sat in my office, staring out over the city. The lights of downtown flickered like stars against the inky sky. My mind kept drifting back to Mr. Fu, his betrayal, his apologies, and the cold, calculating way I had ended things. Was that really how I wanted to be remembered? As the woman who took control out of necessity, not desire? Zara texted me that night asterisk. We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow? I'll bring wine. Asterisk. I didn't respond immediately, but I knew it was time. I needed someone who understood me, someone who had seen me at my best and worst. Zara had always been the one to remind me of who I was beyond all the money and power. The next evening, we sat in a quiet corner of a trendy restaurant. The soft hum of conversation around us. Here you are, Zara said, her eyes twinkling as she poured wine into our glasses. The queen of the world. So what's next? I took a long sip of wine, letting the rich flavor linger. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She raised an eyebrow. You've got the business. You've got the power. What more do you need? I don't know, I said quietly. I thought all of this, everything I've built, would fill the emptiness. But it hasn't. It's like I've climbed this mountain, and I'm standing at the top, but I still feel lost. Zara studied me carefully, her expression softening. Emma, you've been through so much. Sometimes it takes a while to catch up with yourself after everything you've been through. But that doesn't mean you're stuck. I'm not stuck, I said quickly. I just don't know where I'm going anymore. You're always going forward, Emma. Whether you see it or not, you're moving. That's who you are. Her words lingered in the air between us. The truth was, I hadn't known what I was moving toward. Revenge had driven me. But now that the battle was over, I had nothing left to chase but my own reflection. Zara leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know, you've got everything to make a new start. Not just in business. In your life. The world is at your feet. But you've got to decide what you want next. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. I looked at her, a sudden wave of emotion rushing over me. She was right. It wasn't just about taking control, it was about making the choice to move forward. To take the power I had reclaimed and build something real. Something that would finally fill the space inside me. I need to create something more than just success. I said softly. I need to build a life that's mine. Not a life of revenge. Not a life of control. But a life that's mine. Zara smiled, her eyes gleaming with understanding. That's the spirit. You've already done the hard part. Now you just need to figure out what you want to do with all this power. For the first time in a long while, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't just about the next business deal, the next takeover. It was about finding balance, about living a life that didn't revolve around the mistakes of the past. As we finished our dinner, I realized I wasn't afraid of what came next anymore. I wasn't just a survivor of betrayal and heartbreak, I was a woman who had learned to navigate her own path and who now had the power to shape her future. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to take a break. Not from my business, but from the grind of constant success. I needed to rediscover myself without all the pressure and expectations. I wanted to travel, explore, and do things that I had never allowed myself to enjoy because I was always too focused on the next goal. But there was still one last thing I needed to do, one last loose end to tie up. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming something for myself, closure. I dialed Mr. Fu's number. When he picked up, his voice was weary, almost resigned. Emma. Mr. Fu. I said, my voice steady. I've made my peace with what happened. But I want you to understand something, I didn't do this for you. I did it for myself. I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you. You no longer have a place in my life. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Before he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I understand. I hope you do. I said, hanging up. I wasn't the same woman who had loved him. I wasn't the same woman who had built my life around him. I was free, and nothing could take that away from me now. Here's Chapter 7. Continuing with the theme of reclaiming independence and finding fulfillment. Chapter 7. The weeks that followed were quiet. Almost too quiet. I had stepped back from the constant grind of meetings, acquisitions, and decision-making. My team ran the show now, with minimal input from me. The business was thriving, but I no longer needed to prove myself by working 24/7. I had already built something that was powerful. And now, I needed to rebuild myself. Zara was right about one thing, I had achieved so much, yet felt like I was standing still. I realized that the drive for power, while it had served me well in reclaiming my life, couldn't be my only purpose anymore. I had given so much of myself to others, whether it was my past relationships, the business, or the fight for revenge, but now I was learning how to give something back to myself. The first step was taking a break. I took a trip to California, just to get away from everything. No meetings, no emails, just the ocean and the sun. I stayed in a small villa by the beach, far from the world I had built for myself. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The only thing I needed to focus on was the sound of the waves and the quiet moments of reflection. One evening, as I walked along the shore, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, Seeing a message from Lauren *, there's an opportunity for a new partnership. They're asking for you specifically. Should we move forward? Asterisk. I paused, looking out at the endless horizon. For a moment, I considered ignoring the message. But then I realized something. I had built this empire. And though I wasn't actively pursuing it anymore, I couldn't simply walk away from everything I had created. I wasn't abandoning it, I was just learning how to let it run without me. I responded to Lauren *, let's set up a meeting. But I want to take my time with this. No rush. Asterisk. It felt strange, allowing myself to not be in control every second of the day. But I was beginning to realize that life was more than just a series of transactions. It was about finding balance. About giving myself the space to breathe. The next day, I met with a potential partner at a local cafe. They were interested in expanding into the fashion market with an emphasis on luxury. Something that aligned perfectly with my vision. But as we discussed the details, I couldn't help but notice the difference in how I approached this deal. In the past, I would have jumped at the chance to dominate the market, to be at the helm of it all. But now, I found myself weighing the pros and cons, taking my time to understand what this partnership could mean, not just for my business, but for my own personal growth. By the time I left the cafe, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just chasing the next big deal anymore. I was choosing opportunities that aligned with the life I wanted to build, one that balanced work, fulfillment, and freedom. A few weeks later, I returned to the office. My team was thriving without me micromanaging. And it was a relief to see that everything was running smoothly. But it was time for me to step back in. Not as the cold, calculating woman who had once ruled the company with an iron fist, but as someone who had learned to trust the process and empower those around her. Lauren met me in my office, holding a folder. You've got another opportunity. This one is global. Major investors are backing it. And they want you at the forefront. I opened the folder, scanning the proposal. The opportunity was tempting. But as I read through the details, I realized something. It wasn't the kind of project I was passionate about anymore. It was another deal. Another power move. But this time, I wasn't chasing power. I was chasing something more meaningful. I'm going to pass on this one, I said, closing the folder. It's not the right fit. Lauren looked at me, surprised. Are you sure? This could be huge for the company. I know, I said, smiling. But it's not about what's huge anymore. It's about what's right. And I don't want to lose sight of that. That evening, I received a call from Zara. You passed on the deal? I did, I replied, sitting back in my chair. It wasn't for me. I'm proud of you, she said. I think you're finally figuring out what really matters. I think I am too, I said, looking out the window, the city lights shimmering below. I've spent so much time focusing on what I could control. But now, I'm learning how to enjoy the ride. Zara laughed. It's about time. You deserve a break. I know, I said, my voice soft. But more than that, I deserve to live for myself now. Not just for the business. Not just for the revenge. But for me. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Here's Chapter 8. Continuing the journey of self-discovery and independence. Chapter 8. As the months passed, the decisions I made became less about business and more about life. The balance I had been seeking was no longer a far-off dream, it was becoming my reality. I was still involved with the company, still managing my investments and overseeing the global operations. But I had learned to take a step back, to delegate, and to let the people I trusted run things without hovering over them. It wasn't just a matter of business anymore, it was about finding peace in my own life. I started to explore hobbies I had never made time for before. I learned to cook, a passion I had neglected when I was consumed by corporate goals. My apartment, which had once been a cold, sterile space, now felt like a home. I filled it with plants, artwork, and furniture that reflected my personality. For the first time, I felt truly comfortable in my own space. Zara often visited, and we spent hours talking over wine or coffee. Not just about work, but about life, about what came next for both of us. She had always been my rock, but now she was seeing me evolve into someone who wasn't defined by the drama of the past. One afternoon, Zara and I were walking through the park when she asked, "So, what's next for you, Emma? What's the next chapter?" I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. It was a question I had been asking myself for weeks. I had everything I once thought I wanted, but now I was asking myself what I truly needed. The empire I had built, the power I had claimed, it was all just a means to an end. The real challenge now was finding fulfillment in a way that wasn't tied to external success. "I think it's time I start focusing on giving back," I said. "I've spent so much time building for myself, but there are people who could use a hand up. I want to use my resources to make a real impact." Zara looked at me, her eyes softening. "I'm proud of you. You've come so far." We continued walking, the silence between us comfortable. I was still the same ambitious woman who had taken on the world. But now, I saw that ambition as a tool for something bigger than just my own success. A few days later, I made a call to my team. "I want to start a foundation," I said. "One that focuses on empowering women in business, giving them the opportunities and mentorship they need to rise to the top. It's time for me to invest in others." The excitement in their voices was palpable. "This could change everything," my lead strategist said. "This is the next evolution of your legacy." That night, as I sat in my office, I looked over the plans for the foundation. This was the next chapter of my life, not just making money, but making a difference. I had been given everything I had ever wanted, but now it was time to share that with others. The company would continue to thrive, but my heart was set on creating something that would last long after I was gone, a legacy of empowerment. As I looked out at the city from my office window, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had built something incredible, but this foundation would be my greatest accomplishment. Not because it was a business move, but because it was a chance to help others rise, to give them the same opportunities one had worked so hard for. That night, I received a message from my lawyer about the latest development with Mr. Fu's ex-employees. "They've come forward, Emma," she said. "They want to know if you're interested in offering them a position within your company. They're all highly qualified and could add significant value to your team." I hesitated for a moment. There was a time when I would have jumped at the opportunity to recruit people from Mr. Fu's world, to build a team that could help me further dominate the market. But now, it felt like a decision rooted in the past, something that belonged to the old version of me. "I'll meet with them," I replied. "Finally. But I need to make sure they align with my values. If they're truly looking for a fresh start, I'll consider it." The next week, I sat down with a group of former executives from Mr. Fu's company. Their faces were weary, worn down by years of power struggles and corporate maneuvering. But as they spoke about their desire to change, to work for something they believed in, I saw potential. They weren't just looking for a job, they were looking for a purpose. I offered them a deal: join my foundation, work on projects that would help uplift other women in business. It wasn't just about rebuilding a career, it was about rebuilding trust and creating something meaningful. The decision was the right one. I could feel it in my gut. The former executives didn't just want to climb the ladder, they wanted to build it for others. As I walked out of the meeting, I realized something profound: my life wasn't about power anymore. It was about creating a space where others could thrive. just as I had. A few days later, I took a trip to the countryside. I spent the weekend alone, away from the noise of the city and the constant demands of my business. I woke up early each morning, watching the sunrise over the mountains. I hiked through the trails, breathing in the fresh air, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The quiet was comforting. It reminded me that, no matter how much I had achieved, I was still human. I still needed moments of stillness to reconnect with myself. On the last day of my trip, I sat on a bench overlooking a lake, and I thought about everything that had led me here, the pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal. It had all been part of the journey, but it was the decisions I made moving forward that would define me. I knew what I wanted now. I didn't want to be defined by the past. I wanted to build a future that was mine, one that mattered, one that left a lasting impact on the world. Here is Chapter 9. Continuing the story of transformation and personal growth. Chapter 9. The foundation launched quietly but gained traction quickly. My initial goal was simple: to provide women with the resources, mentorship, and opportunities to succeed in business. But as the weeks went by, I realized this was more than just charity or philanthropy. It was a movement. We held our first event, a networking dinner for women in the tech and business sectors. I wasn't just attending as the founder, I was there to listen, to learn, to connect. I wanted to hear the struggles they had faced, the battles they had fought to get where they were, and the obstacles still in their way. The room was filled with energy. Powerful, accomplished women, all from different walks of life, sitting together, sharing their experiences. It was a feeling I had never experienced before. It was electric. And it was real. At one point, a woman came up to me, holding a glass of wine. She had an air of quiet confidence, her eyes sharp and calculating. You've done something incredible here," she said, nodding at the group of women around us. "I've been in the industry for years. But this is what we've been missing. I'm just getting started," I said, smiling. "I didn't build this for me. I built it for all of you." She smiled back, but there was a sense of awe in her eyes. She wasn't the only one who felt that way. Over the next few hours, the room filled with shared stories, collaboration, and the kind of raw energy that only comes when women come together to build something bigger than themselves. It was a feeling I had never known. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a businesswoman or an ex-fiancé seeking revenge. I was part of something that would leave a real mark on the world. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to speak at an international women's leadership summit. I knew this was my moment to fully step into the role I had been avoiding. I wasn't just leading a foundation, I was leading a movement. The day of the summit, I stood backstage, waiting for my turn. The room was filled with powerful women, CEOs, founders, trailblazers in every industry. And there I was, a woman who had come from nothing, having to prove herself not only to the world but to myself. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage with confidence. But inside, my heart was racing. The spotlight hit me, and for a moment, I hesitated. But then I saw the faces of the women in the crowd. I saw their expectation, their hopes. They weren't looking for perfection, they were looking for someone who had fought, who had fallen and risen again. They were looking for a leader who wasn't afraid to share the truth. I opened my mouth, and the words came out effortlessly. "I'm not here to tell you how to succeed. I'm here to tell you that failure is not the end, it's just the beginning." I spoke about the importance of resilience, of standing up after the world knocks you down. I spoke about the importance of not letting anyone define your worth, about creating opportunities where none exist. And, most importantly, I spoke about the power of women coming together to build something greater than any one person. The crowd was silent for a moment. And then, as I finished my speech, the room erupted in applause. I had finally found my voice. And it was a voice that wasn't just for me, it was for every woman who had ever been told she couldn't. Back at my office, things were moving fast. The foundation was growing, and the partnerships were rolling in. But even with all the success, I still found myself drawn to the same question that had haunted me for months, what is the next step? I had already proven I could rebuild. I had already reclaimed everything I had lost. And more. But now, it was about sustainability. It was about building something that would last. And I couldn't do that by constantly running from the past. One day, as I sat in my office, I received a message that made me pause. It was from Mr. Fu. It had been months since we last spoke, and I hadn't expected to hear from him again. The message was short, but it hit harder than I anticipated. I don't expect your forgiveness. I know what I've done, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day. I'm sorry. I hope one day we can both find peace with this. I stared at the message for a long time. The anger I had once felt wasn't there anymore. It wasn't even indifference, it was a quiet sense of closure. I thought back to the woman I had been when I first ended things with him. A woman consumed by betrayal and anger. And now, here I was, a woman who had risen above that. Who had built something new for herself. I realized that the closure I needed wasn't about him. It was about me. And I had already closed that chapter. I wasn't the same person who had been betrayed. I wasn't the same person who had sought revenge. I had moved on. I put my phone down and smiled. The weight of the past finally lifting. I was free. A week later, I returned to my roots. I spent the day at a local community center, volunteering to teach young girls about business and entrepreneurship. It was humbling, seeing their faces light up as they realized that the world was full of possibilities. I didn't need to be at the top of the corporate ladder to feel fulfilled anymore. I didn't need the recognition or the power to feel worthy. I was already enough. And I knew, no matter what came next, I had built something that would outlast me. Here's Chapter 10, concluding the journey of transformation and empowerment. Chapter 10. A few months passed. And with each day, I felt the weight of the past lifting further away. I had made peace with the decisions I had once thought would define me. I was no longer just the woman who fought for revenge. The woman who reclaimed her power. I was someone who had found balance, someone who had learned to give as much to others as I had to myself. The foundation had grown into something bigger than I had ever imagined. We had reached hundreds of women across the world, offering scholarships, mentorships, and opportunities to women who had the drive but not always the resources. The ripple effect was undeniable. In cities across the country, women were rising, building businesses, leading teams, and taking control of their futures. The network we created was powerful, and it was just getting started. My life had taken a direction I hadn't expected, but one that I had chosen, not because it was the easiest, but because it was the most fulfilling. Zara had been my partner through this entire journey. Her encouragement, her guidance, and her unwavering belief in me had been a constant. She had seen me at my worst and my best. And now, together, we were watching something extraordinary unfold. One morning, as I sat in my office, going over the latest proposals for the foundation, I received a message from an old colleague, a woman who had once been in the same industry as Mr. Fu. Emma. I heard what you've been doing with the foundation. I'm so proud of you. Your success, your transformation, it's an inspiration. Let's catch up soon. I hadn't expected to hear from her, but as I read the message, something clicked. I hadn't just built a business or a network. I had built a legacy. Something that would last far beyond my own involvement. This foundation was the beginning of something far greater than myself. It wasn't just about the power I had reclaimed, it was about making sure that the future was different for those who came after me. I smiled and replied to her, agreeing to meet the following week. The world was shifting, and I was part of that change. I wasn't just a woman who had climbed to the top, I was someone who had opened the door for others to do the same. Later that evening, I found myself at a quiet dinner with Zara. The restaurant was tucked away in a corner of the city, a place where we could talk without distractions. As we sat across from each other, the soft glow of candlelight reflecting in our glasses, I could feel the weight of everything I had built settling into place. "You've come so far," Zara said, her voice full of admiration. "You're not just a businesswoman. You're a trailblazer. You've created something that's going to change everything." I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of my wine. I'm proud of what I've done. But it's not just about me anymore. It's about what I can do for others. The future is about lifting each other up. Zara smiled, raising her glass to mine. "Here's to the future. To everything that's coming next. To everything that's already here," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. "We've already built something incredible." As the evening wore on, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of peace. My journey had been difficult, full of challenges, heartbreak, and betrayal. But in the end, I had found something more meaningful than revenge or power. I had found purpose. In the weeks that followed, I continued to work with the foundation, focusing on creating lasting change. I met with mentors, business leaders, and young women eager to break into industries that had once seemed closed off to them. The connections were real, the opportunities were tangible, and the future was full of promise. I spent less time in the office, allowing my team to take the reins of the day-to-day operations. I was no longer chasing success, I was living it. I had everything I needed within myself now. The foundation, the businesses, the relationships I had built, it was all part of the bigger picture. One afternoon, while I was reviewing a new proposal for a joint partnership with another nonprofit, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered it, curious. "Emma?" the voice on the other end said, hesitant. "This is Ethan." For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Ethan, the man who had once been my world, the man who had betrayed me so completely, was now on the phone, calling me after all this time. He had never reached out since our final conversation. I took a deep breath before responding. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then a quiet voice. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I don't expect anything from you. But I wanted to apologize. I've done a lot of thinking, and I realize how much I hurt you. You didn't deserve that." His words, though sincere, didn't stir the same anger or resentment they once would have. I had moved on. I had already healed. "I appreciate the apology," I said simply, my voice calm. "But it doesn't change anything. I've already moved on from that chapter. I'm in a different place now." "Good," he said softly. "I'm glad. You deserve the best." And that was it. The past, finally put to rest. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything lift once again. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was free. Free from the past. Free from the need for approval. Free to be who I was meant to be. As I looked out at the city from my office window, I realized that everything I had gone through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the revenge, had led me to this moment. And now, for the first time in years, I knew that my future wasn't defined by what had happened to me. It was defined by what I chose to create. This was my story. This was my time. And I was ready for whatever came next. The end.